In every person's life, there are cherished dreams, visions of an ideal future that warm the soul and guide one through life. For a woman named Liza, this vision was a balcony adorned with lace curtains. She dreamt of a small but cozy balcony in her own apartment. It didn't matter if it could barely fit 2 people, let alone 3 standing shoulder to shoulder. The main thing was that it existed, a private corner where she could step out and dream. In her imagination, a picture of happiness unfolded. A caring husband with a dimple on his chin, as if he'd stepped right out of an Alain Delon movie. Children, definitely a boy and a girl, a spacious apartment with a large kitchen filled with the aroma of cinnamon and apples, and of course a balcony overflowing with flowers, with ethereal lace curtains swaying in the breeze. However, over time, this idyll began to change, losing its vibrant colors. By 30, the image of the ideal husband had faded. By 40, the hope of having children had vanished. The longed-for apartment had shrunk in size. For how much space does one person truly need? The view from the window ceased to matter. Only the little balcony, with its white curtains and flowers and beautiful boxes, remained unchanged, like a lighthouse illuminating the path forward. When choosing an apartment, Liza's first question was always about the presence of a balcony. One day, a realtor named Elmira offered her a splendid option for the price, a quiet neighborhood not far from the center, on the 3rd floor, newly renovated, with respectable owners and all documents in perfect order. But Liza, blushing and breathless under Elmira's disparaging gaze, refused. There was no balcony. About 15 years ago, the factory management building where Liza worked underwent renovations. Walls were repainted, furniture replaced, and old items from Soviet times were destined for the dump. Among them were ugly rectangular brown plastic flower boxes. Liza wouldn't let them be discarded. She hauled them back to her room in the factory dormitory and spent long evenings transforming them, painting them, and decorating them with seashells, colorful salt dough patterns, and pebbles. Renewed and beautified, the boxes waited patiently on the mezzanine for their moment. Sometimes Liza would climb onto a stool, take them down, and imagine what flowers she would plant in them. Geraniums in this one, morning glories here, and her beloved violets there. The balcony that didn't exist became more and more ornate and beautiful. The dream, or rather what was left of it, came true when Liza turned 50. This milestone was preceded by 2 unfortunate events, which strangely enough were directly related to the fulfillment of her wish. Such is life. Bad often leads to good, and vice versa. The first event was Liza's eviction from the dormitory, where she had lived since graduating from university and getting a job at a factory in Kazan, against the wishes of her grandmother, who wanted her to return to Alexeyevskoye. The factory had closed in the early 90s, but for 25 years, no one had paid attention to the former factory workers living in the block 5-story building. Liza had moved from the planning department to work in the administrative and economic department of a shopping center. The storm broke suddenly on an ordinary day. The weather can be predicted to take precautions, but human malice, greed, or foolishness almost never can. However, in this situation, there was no one to blame but Liza. She was informed that since she had been dismissed from a non-existent enterprise, she had no right to live in its dormitory. "Will you really evict all of us? Many have children," Liza protested timidly, thinking of others first. It was then that she discovered that while she was painting her flower boxes, her neighbors had privatized their rooms. Now they were owners, and owners could not be evicted. Liza and a few other equally imprudent individuals were to vacate the premises. Perhaps it could have been challenged. She could have gone somewhere, proven something to someone. But Liza didn't know who, where, or what. So, she had no choice but to go with her boxes, curtains, and other belongings to her grandmother's in Alexievskoye. Anna Yosifovna was 88 years old. She became a grandmother at 38, which completely ruined her already difficult character. Her daughter, whose flightiness had made her a grandmother, Anna Yosifovna referred to as nothing less than that flighty one. When Liza was tiny, she thought that was her mother's name. She loved her with a somewhat artificial love, pitied her, and feared finding any resemblance to her. Liza never knew her father. Her mother was hit by a car when Liza was 2. Everything that flighty one did was worthy of censure. She couldn't even cross the road properly. She ended up under the wheels. Anna Yosifovna considered her main task in raising Liza to eradicate the slightest resemblance between her granddaughter and her wayward mother. Yet, that flighty one always managed to show herself at the most unexpected moments. Therefore, there was no trust in Liza. Grandma had to constantly keep her hand on the pulse. Every visit from her granddaughter Liza from Kazan to Anna Yosifovna was accompanied by an unchanging ritual. "Liza, wash your hands immediately." Anna Yosifovna's voice boomed, her hearing impairment requiring extra volume. "Yes, yes, Grandma, I'm coming," her granddaughter invariably replied, heading to the bathroom. "Look at her, she's coming," Anna Yosifovna muttered, closely following Liza and vigilantly supervising the hand-washing process. "Did you use soap?" Grandma, like a strict inspector, meticulously evaluated every aspect of her granddaughter's life, never missing an opportunity for criticism and moralizing. "Put on warm wool socks and warm pants. Don't forget to anoint your nose with oxalinic ointment for RVE prevention. Jeans are the height of bad taste. A plaid skirt is strictly forbidden for women with a pear-shaped figure. And only someone utterly devoid of style could choose a jacket of such a provocative color. And long hair after 40 is simply indecent." After the death of her grandfather, a war veteran 8 years prior, Anna Yosifovna remained in a state of perpetual mourning and indignation. It seemed to Liza that her grandmother had perceived her grandfather's passing as a personal betrayal and held a grudge against the whole world. Grandpa was an extraordinarily kind man, always smiling and soft-spoken. He was ready to fulfill any request from his beloved granddaughter, with one exception: stories about the war. This topic was taboo for him. His refusal was categorical and firm, although, in Liza's opinion, Grandpa had plenty to tell. A war hero, recipient of many awards, and even a real combat revolver. The sharp-nosed Nagant, carefully wrapped in soft cloth, was kept in a distant drawer of the wardrobe. A box of cartridges lay beside it. From time to time, Grandpa would take out the weapon, meticulously clean, and oil it. Liza watched, mesmerized by every movement of her grandfather's hands. He had extraordinary hands, kind and sensitive. These hands crafted things from natural materials, repaired furniture and appliances, mended shoes, drew funny pictures, sewed on detached buttons, and gently stroked Liza's hair. It was difficult for Liza to imagine that these same hands had held a weapon, and unhesitatingly pointed it at a living person. Perhaps Grandpa himself couldn't imagine it, which is why he remained silent about those distant events. "Grandpa, does your pistol shoot?" Liza would ask. "First, little fox," Grandpa would reply, affectionately calling his granddaughter. "It's not a pistol, but a revolver. And to be precise, a Nagant, named after the brothers Léon and Émile Nagant, who invented it. And second, do you see this round thing? That's the cylinder." Grandpa would press a button on the left side. The cylinder swings out, and the cartridges, 7 in total, are inserted here into the chambers. He would demonstrate the loading process to Liza and skillfully return the cylinder to its place. "Now you need to aim and pull the trigger, this tricky little hook." "Oh, Grandpa, I still don't understand anything," Liza admitted. Liza loved her grandfather more than anyone in the world. Only with him did she feel light and calm. She was terrified to imagine how she would live without him in the confined space of the apartment, under her grandmother's constant scrutiny. But fate had other plans. Soon after Grandpa's death, Grandma also passed away. Liza was tormented by guilt. Firstly, she considered herself a bad person because she didn't want to live with her grandmother, and the latter, as if freeing her from this burden, had passed away. Now Grandma looked reproachfully at her granddaughter from a large portrait in a heavy frame. Secondly, life in her grandmother's apartment became unbearable. Liza constantly heard her voice, demanding cleanliness and order, and felt her disapproving gaze when she was too lazy to vacuum the rug or ate in front of the TV. The memories weighed her down and drove her away. Moreover, the apartment where she had spent her entire childhood didn't have a balcony. So, Liza decided to move. Selling the apartment in Alexievskoye district and buying a place in Kazan seemed an incredible feat. But she made the effort. She was proud of herself, feeling brave and decisive. This feeling was new and caused some awkwardness, like a new dress of too bold a cut. Entering her own apartment, Liza enthusiastically surveyed every corner. It didn't matter that the spacious 3-room apartment had turned into a modest 1-room apartment. Here, she was to discover what freedom truly meant. And could freedom ever restrict? Liza wandered through the rooms, kitchen and hallway, and, a little embarrassed, gently stroked the walls. This place was magical. It belonged only to her. Liza had a little money, and she enthusiastically began spending it on furnishing her nest. "Save it!" the commanding voice of her deceased grandmother echoed in her head. "You're dead. You're no longer here," Liza said loudly, daring to contradict her for the first time in her life, and pushed Anna Iosifovna's portrait further into the closet. Her first purchase was light and airy white lace tulle curtains. Liza hung them on the glazed balcony, looked at the courtyard through the delicate fabric, and felt utterly happy. From this piercing sensation, a tightly strung chord sang within her. Her fingertips tingled, and she wanted to laugh. Some seedlings immediately found new homes in the balcony boxes, although it is well known that spring is a more favorable time for such endeavors. "It's okay," Liza reassured herself. "Next year my balcony will transform into a blooming oasis, overflowing with greenery." It was summer, a long-awaited and bountiful season. Her vacation had ended, but surprisingly, Liza didn't feel her usual sadness. At work, colleagues couldn't help but notice her transformation. She seemed to have shed a decade. Her gait had acquired a dancing lightness, and her gaze a mysterious radiance. Many whispered that Liza had finally met her soulmate and, as the saying goes, had managed to catch the last train. But the truth was different. Liza was returning to her own quiet paradise, preparing a light dinner, brewing aromatic tea, and, armed with a cup, heading to the balcony. There, perched on a stool, she unhurriedly savored each sip of her drink, accompanied by chocolate, relishing every moment. The idyll continued until the neighbors from the 5th floor returned from the village at the end of August. Suddenly, a creaking, rattling sound of an opening window broke the silence. "Ugh, it's stifling," a loud female voice boomed. "I'm all sweaty, like in a bathhouse." "Yeah, and it stinks like something died," a male voice echoed. "Let's air out this cesspool." The woman continued to say something from deeper within the apartment, but her words were now hard to make out. "Oh, for heaven's sake," her companion said, and struck a match. The acrid smell of tobacco smoke wafted through the air. Liza hastily closed the balcony window and retreated to her room. Sitting on the sofa, she froze, her gaze fixed, lost in thought. Her fragile world hadn't completely collapsed, but it had significantly shaken. She felt like Robinson Crusoe, suddenly discovering that cannibals had landed on his secluded island. With the neighbor's return, her nightly ritual lost all its charm. Liza, of course, continued to open the kitchen vent, the balcony door, and the window to escape the stuffiness. And she would step onto the balcony, but almost always had to hastily retreat. The neighbors brazenly intruded on her personal space. They kept their windows wide open, talked without bothering to lower their voices, and watched television with the volume turned up full blast so Liza could hear every line. Most likely, these two had no idea she even existed. But Liza knew when they ran out of toilet paper or soap, and she was aware of what they ate for dinner, and when they planned to visit their grandchildren. The man's name was Pyotr, and his companion's was Dora. An unusual, rarely encountered name that her husband, in fits of arguments, transformed into the insulting Dura, fool, openly proud of his own wit. The couple constantly squabbled over trifles, but united amicably against their son-in-law, whom they both detested. Liza had seen them a few times in the stairwell. Large figures, fleshy hands, thick necks. Dora's flip-flops clapped loudly against her heels. Pyotr was invariably accompanied by the sharp smell of tobacco smoke. It seemed a cigarette had grown onto the corner of his mouth, and his right eye was constantly squinted. A powerful wave of animal strength and unbreakable health emanated from both of them. "It's okay. The cold weather will come soon," Liza reassured herself, hoping to shield herself from the neighbors with tightly closed, double-glazed windows. But soon something terrible happened. Pyotr, as usual, flicked a cigarette butt. It flew onto Liza's balcony and burned through her tulle curtain. The light-lace curtain was irrevocably ruined. A hideous brown hole gaped in it. Liza couldn't find anything good in what had happened or tell herself, "Thank God there wasn't a fire." She looked with pain at the mutilated curtain, through which she had so loved to admire the world, and she cried. Then, wiping away her tears, she removed the damaged fabric and went to her neighbors. They had to see what they had done, apologize, and promise that it wouldn't happen again. Liza wasn't going to demand compensation for the ruined item. She merely hoped that Pyotr and Dora, feeling guilty, would become quieter. The doorbell gave a short ding, but the door didn't open for a long time. Liza was about to ring again, thinking they hadn't heard her. But at that very moment, Dora appeared before her, a colossal, monumental mountain of a person. "Well?" she growled curtly. The hallway smelled appetizingly of fried potatoes, and behind Dora, the television blared deafeningly. "Good evening," Liza stammered timidly. "I'm your downstairs neighbor." "Well," Dora repeated, without changing her tone. "The thing is, your husband," Liza began, stumbling and feeling the awkwardness of the situation, "dropped a cigarette butt and burned my curtain." Finally, she finished the sentence and extended the crumpled ball of tulle to Dora as proof. Dora stood motionless and unperturbed, legs spread, like a wrestler in a ring. Several seconds of agonizing silence, and then a verbal waterfall crashed down on Liza. "And why are you shoving your rag in my face? You burned it yourself and blame us? Smart, are you? Go find fools somewhere else. Look at her, you chicken." Bang! The door slammed shut right in front of Liza's nose. It felt as if she had been doused with icy water. Her hands and feet went numb, her throat was dry, and her ears rang. She returned to her apartment, clutching the mutilated curtain to her chest, locked the door, and spent the rest of the evening listening to Dora and Pyotr, bad-mouthing the bitch and schemer from downstairs, who had come to extort a pile of money from them for a ripped rag. Liza threw the curtain straight into the trash, as if burying a part of her life with it. The balcony window, stripped of its usual framing, gaped with stark emptiness. She swore to herself never to open it again, at least not until Dora and Pyotr left their accustomed spot and returned to their quiet village. Her already cramped world shrank to the size of a nutshell. "I just need to ignore their existence," Liza repeated, trying to convince herself of the impossible. However, having made this resolute decision, she found herself trapped, like the protagonist of an old parable about a student striving for enlightenment. The master advised him not to think of white monkeys, and from then on, the obsessive image pursued him relentlessly. Liza involuntarily listened to every rustle, inwardly preparing for the worst. And this worst was not long in coming. She usually went to bed early, trying to fall asleep by 10 in the evening. In her modest abode, only the soothing ticking of the clock reigned, while upstairs, a real pandemonium unfolded. And remarkably, this noisy chaos only began after her ill-fated visit. Liza tried in vain to remember what had caused such a metamorphosis. The neighbors slammed their sofa open with deafening crashes, as if dropping it directly onto poor Liza's head. The television never stopped, spewing streams of sound. It seemed Dora and Pyotr deliberately scattered themselves in different corners of the apartment to shout over each other, competing in decibels. Heels drummed on the floor, floorboards groaned and creaked pitifully, as if begging for mercy. Something was constantly falling, crashing, and cracking, creating an unbearable cacophony. Liza lay in bed, staring blankly at the ceiling, listening to this chaotic concert. And when the noise finally subsided after midnight, the longed-for sleep would not come, as if out of spite. "You've scared sleep away," her wise grandmother used to say. One week turned into another, and the nightmare repeated itself evening after evening, night after night. Liza tossed and turned in bed, barely falling asleep by morning, and woke up shattered to the annoying ring of her alarm clock. With a heavy head, she dragged herself to work like a ghost. And then, in the middle of the third week, When the neighbors again kept her from closing her eyes, her patience snapped. This time, the door opened instantly. It seemed Dora was waiting at the threshold, anticipating the uninvited guest's visit. A triumphant smirk played on the woman's face, leaving no doubt that she had been expecting this encounter. "Could you please be a little quieter? It's late," Liza blurted out, skipping the formalities of greeting. She was driven to exasperation by insomnia and, perhaps for that reason, spoke abruptly, without stumbling, as if firing off words. Dora smiled voluptuously, anticipating the coming scandal, and went on the offensive. "What do you want? Are we singing songs here, throwing parties? We live quietly, bothering no one. Look at her, nosy busybody." Pyotr appeared from behind her, a man with an impressive drooping nose and round, owl-like eyes. His chin was covered in grizzled stubble. He scratched it with a crunch and asked indifferently, "What's going on here?" Dora put her hands on her hips and suddenly blurted out, "Or maybe you're sneaking around with my husband at night?" "What are you saying?" Pyotr exclaimed, clearly not expecting such a turn of events. Liza was speechless with surprise. "We know types like you," Dora growled. A gray mouse, but she's trying to get close to another woman's man. Liza couldn't find the strength to object, to refute the absurd accusations, and simply fled, escaping the torrent of words. Returning to her apartment, she locked herself in, but her home no longer felt like a fortress. The walls seemed to have betrayed her, and there was no place left in the world where she could find refuge. There was no one to offer her a helping hand. That night, she fell asleep quickly, as if plunging into an abyss. More precisely, her exhausted consciousness sank into oblivion, and she fell into some kind of pit. There, in the otherworldly realm, her grandfather and grandmother appeared in her dream. Anna Yosifovna stood in the doorway of the old apartment Liza had sold, looking at her with an expression mixing pity and displeasure. And Grandpa sat in his favorite armchair by the window, fiddling with his nagant, turning it in his hands, paying no attention to his granddaughter. Neither he nor she spoke a word, but Liza felt as if they were trying to say something. Waking up, she tried in vain to grasp the meaning of their silent message. At work, it turned out that Liza had absent-mindedly ordered furniture polish instead of toilet bowl cleaner. She had confused them. Now there was so much polish she could open her own store, but nothing to scrub the white toilet bowls with. "Liza, how could this happen?" Administrator Venera frowned in displeasure. "You've been acting strange lately. Has something happened? Are you sick?" Colleagues couldn't help but notice the changes in Liza's behavior. And since she wasn't quick to share her feelings, opinions were divided. Some thought Liza's lover had left her, others suspected a serious illness. The cleaner, Raisa, for example, was convinced it was oncology. Despite her annoyance, Venera paused, waiting. The concern in her voice suddenly breached Liza's protective armor. And Liza, usually not prone to frankness, burst into tears and through her sobs recounted her misfortunes with the noisy neighbors. "Is that all?" Venera, disappointed by such a prosaic outcome, almost said, but restrained herself, and then gave valuable advice. Contact the district police officer. How simple it all is, Liza mused, heading to the police station in the next building that evening. And how did she not think of it herself? Where else to go for help but there? The police would surely help, give a stern warning to the hooligans. "What do you want from me, my dear?" The district police officer asked Liza kindly, giving her an embarrassed, apologetic smile, like someone whose stomach betrayed them at the most inconvenient moment. The policeman was about 20 years younger than Liza, but addressed her condescendingly, using an outdated word that had gone out of use before he was born. "Well, at least go talk to them. Exert some influence," Liza timidly asked the district police officer. "But they're not doing anything wrong, dear," the thin, lanky officer said, spreading his hands. He sat at the table, bent double, his feet almost touching Liza's chair. "How can that be?" "Nothing?" Liza exclaimed. "They don't let me sleep. They make noise and bother me." "Perhaps your hearing is too sensitive. The people, as I understand it, are elderly. They don't have drunken parties. Music isn't blaring at full volume." "Other neighbors aren't complaining," the officer replied. "But they can't hear anything," Liza tried to explain. "Our apartments are corner units. There are neighbors only on one side, and that's the hallway and bathroom. There's no one above them. It's the top floor. Only me downstairs." "Exactly, dear." The officer raised a finger. "You yourself confirmed it. Only you. Who will prove that they are actually doing what you say? And what's so special about what they're doing? We are adults. Do you even hear yourself?" They stomp their feet, slam the sofa open, talk loudly. Waving Liza off, the precinct officer, however, was a man of his word, and having received the complaint, visited Dora and Pyotr. But it would have been better if he hadn't, because things only got worse. The couple, of course, feigned surprise and denied everything. And the entire building, where Pyotr and Dora had lived for many years, and Liza for only a few months, learned that she was a dishonest, quarrelsome, frivolous woman who also flirted with other women's husbands. Now Liza couldn't leave the entrance without encountering a reproachful, curious, or hostile glance. Explaining the situation to everyone was pointless, and Liza tried to slip past quickly, which only strengthened the residents' opinion that Dora was telling the truth, and Liza was to blame for all these terrible breaches of good neighborliness. Sometimes Liza thought about starting a fight, turning up the TV loudly, or even buying a piano. She knew how to play, but she realized in time that the residents of the third floor would also hear it, and her already battered reputation would be completely destroyed. October arrived, it suddenly turned very cold, and the rains began. The wind furiously hurled handfuls of water at the window, like stones, and Liza vaguely thought that the glass might not hold. But it did, of course. One day, Liza saw Elmira, the realtor who had advised her to buy another apartment without a balcony, on the street. The woman didn't notice Liza, who darted into the nearest store to avoid a meeting. Her heart ached. She was afraid that Elmira would ask how she was living in her new place, and by her unhappy face, she would understand that everything was bad and would laugh at her. And if she sympathized, it would be even worse. Then she would surely cry from shame, the realization of an irreparable mistake and her own foolishness. At work, everything went wrong. Liza neglected her home. She no longer wanted to wash windows and clean floors as before. The furniture gradually became covered with dust, and the refrigerator smelled unpleasant. The plants had long since dried up and yellowed, and now pathetic stems and sticks protruded from the dry gray soil. The paint peeled from the flower boxes, and seashells and colorful pebbles fell off them. The window, uncovered by curtains, drew her gaze. Liza looked down into the courtyard, and it seemed to her that she was looking not from a balcony, but from the window of a solitary cell. Everything was dying day by day: the balcony, the apartment, and Liza. She bought strong sedatives and swallowed them by the handful, but still slept just as poorly. Fear did not leave her. The torment continued, and there was no hope that Dora and Pyotr would tire of it. One day, Liza met her neighbor on the stairs and asked, looking her in the eyes, "Why are you tormenting me? What have I done to you?" The neighbor didn't deny it, shrug her shoulders, or tap her temple as if to say, "Are you crazy? What are you talking about? I can't stand people like you," Dora spat out. "Quiet ones, intellectuals." This sounded like an insult. They sniff around, spy, and then report. Dora was convinced of her righteousness, and pushing the slender Liza with her powerful side, walked past. Even if it was quiet upstairs, even if Liza didn't hear the neighbors or the TV, she still felt uneasy. A heavy feeling never left her for a second. Her soul was not at peace. It seemed that something bad was about to happen, and she would draw her head into her shoulders, expecting a blow. "That's it," she thought one day, and this thought wouldn't leave her head. What's it? Liza herself didn't know, but there was such finality, such hopelessness in that phrase that it lay heavy on her heart, not letting her breathe. On October 20th, her grandfather appeared in her dream again. This time he was alone, sitting in the same spot and looking at Liza. "This is wrong," he said, and strictly added, "You must not tolerate such outrage, little fox." The voice sounded, but she didn't notice his lips move. At that very moment, her grandfather grabbed a cup from the table in front of him and slammed it forcefully onto the floor. A sharp crash echoed, and Liza woke up. Somehow, she had managed to fall back asleep, and it was past 10:50 p.m. What woke her wasn't her grandfather's carelessly discarded porcelain set, but a persistent thumping overhead. It was as if someone was furiously hammering directly on the floor. Pyotr, the neighbor, was probably nailing down baseboards. Thump, 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 thump. Rhythmic blows, with a monotonous, dulling regularity, pierced the silence. Liza felt as if giant nails were being driven into her skull. She desperately wanted to cover her ears, but she knew it was useless. The sound penetrated deep inside, resonating with every cell of her body. Pushing the blanket aside, she sat up in bed, then stood, all the while feeling a strange sensation, as if she were watching herself from a distance. It was her, yet not her. Perhaps the real Liza was still in the embrace of sleep, continuing to dream of her deceased grandfather. She turned her head towards the balcony, the very one that had so often appeared in her dreams, which Liza had so tenderly made her own, striving to bring her deepest desires to life. "This is wrong. You cannot tolerate such outrage," she murmured thoughtfully, repeating someone's recent words. Whose words were they? Alas, she couldn't recall, and Liza abandoned her fruitless attempts. Instead, as if obeying an invisible command, acting almost mechanically, like a wind-up doll, she approached the wardrobe, flung open the door, and retrieved an item carefully kept on the third shelf from the top, meticulously hidden from prying eyes, and as always, wrapped in a soft cloth. As she ascended the stairs to the floor above, Liza felt a comforting weight in her hand, and fleetingly thought that she had only held this peculiar object twice before. The first time, when she took it from the apartment she had sold and placed it in one of the cardboard boxes, and the second, when she took it out of the box and put it on the shelf. Will it work? No, she had no idea. However, she only needed to raise her hand, point in the right direction. And that would be no trouble at all, for the target would be so substantial that missing would be impossible, she thought. And she giggled like a little girl embarking on a dangerous game. All that's left is to cock the hammer, pull the trigger with all my might, and a deafening boom will echo throughout the stairwell. That will be their boom in response to their thump, thump, thump. Another amusing thought. Approaching Pyotr and Dora's door, Liza could no longer suppress a wide smile. A little earlier, in her apartment, she had noticed that 2 cartridges rested in the revolver cylinder, like precious jewels in elegant chambers. Exactly 2. Well, imagine that. No more will be needed. Liza spun the cylinder, as Grandpa had once shown her, to align the cartridges with the barrel. Everything must work. How else could it be? Grandpa always looks after his Nagant, lovingly caring for it. He always does everything impeccably. But Grandpa, it seems, left this world long ago. Liza frowned, trying in vain to remember when exactly that had happened. Perhaps last month or last year or even earlier? No, what nonsense. Grandpa is alive. She saw him very, very recently just now, and he looked at her with love and told her something very, very important. Yes, of course, that's exactly how it was. He said everything was wrong, and that's why Liza is going upstairs now to fix everything. The last step was behind her, and Liza, marching with precise steps, like a brave soldier on parade, approached the familiar door, burgundy, wooden, with its locks gleaming predatorily. With her free hand, she smoothed her disheveled hair and straightened the folds of her nightgown. I forgot my robe, Liza suddenly realized. It's improper to appear in public like this. But there's no going back now that you've arrived and are standing on the doorstep. Without further deliberation, Liza leaned forward, pressed the doorbell button, and heard the familiar trill. She froze, waiting. Hurried footsteps sounded from behind the door,